Welcome to Mind, Body, Health, and Politics. I'm your host, Dr. Richard Lewis Miller. The mission of Mind, Body, Health, and Politics is to enhance your physical and emotional well-being and encourage community. And I say encourage community because I believe that human beings are basically tribal animals and that we do our best. We live the healthiest. We have the longest lives with the least problems when we live tribally in connection with others. We live cooperatively and collaboratively. And basically, 95 or more percent of humanity are friendly animals. We like doing all kinds of things with each other. You look at all the things we do, whether it's a sewing circle or playing golf or shooting guns or riding cars or eating. We love eating together, getting together in circles and eating together. At the same time, there's a small percentage of us, very small, but very powerful, who are different than the rest of us in an important way. They're predators, they're dominators, and throughout all of history, they have created big problems for us. It's our job to stay in community and stay collaborative and stay cooperative and not let the dominators and the predators divide us, not let them create antagonism amongst us, but continue for us in community. Today on Mind, Body, Health, and Politics, I have one of the country's, if not the world's, most prominent psychologist, Rick Hanson. He is an author. You've all read many of his books, I hope, or heard his podcasts. And it is my privilege to have him here with us today. Welcome, Rick.
Well, Richard, that was extremely touching. You really took me by by surprise there. And also, I would have to say that based on my own background in evolutionary neuropsychology and my interest in things like the Global Compassion Coalition, I would agree with every word you spoke there about our deep nature to be cooperative and kind, particularly with those we define as us, with also, of course, our vulnerabilities toward grievance and aggression, vengeance and dehumanization toward those who are defined as them, particularly if these, as you say, dominators try to make us fear and dehumanize those who are them. In any case, I felt completely aligned with what you had to say, and it was a great cogent summary. So I'm particularly looking forward to this conversation.
Well, thank you. And maybe we can talk more about it because we're at a time in history where dominators and predators are rearing up around the world. And we know that. Mm-hmm. And there are signs that they are creating division amongst we the people, which is dangerous.
Yeah, you're probably familiar with the parable of the two wolves in the heart.
Please share with us.
For people in general, the way this parable arose is a little fraught in that Billy Graham apparently attributed it to a Cherokee elder to kind of glamorize it. And so there's been a little pushback about that. Setting that aside, just acknowledging it, people can take this at face value. And you'll find versions of this parable around the world. The version I heard is really straightforward. A woman was asked toward the end of her life, "Grandmother, how did you become so successful? How did you become so wise, so happy, so loved? What did you do?" And she paused and reflected and then said, "It's because when I was young like you, I realized that in my heart were two wolves, one of love and one of hate. And most important, I realized that everything depended on which one I fed each day." Boom. And beautiful, huh? And
very beautiful and touching. I could feel it as you said it.
That's exactly right. I mean, we all have almost everyone has the capacity, even the inclination under certain conditions toward the wolf of hate and tapping into certain aspects of it, like healthy outrage, healthy moral fury on behalf of others or yourself, standing up for yourself, okay. But generally speaking, as you know well, as humans evolved biologically, our species emerging around 300,000 years ago, grounded in tool manufacturing hominids, going back another couple million years before that, living in small bands, we evolved while the brain tripled in its size during that 3 million year period. We evolved to cooperate with us and to compete and often aggress upon violently other bands. So we have these two wolves in our heart. And the fundamental summary, if we are to live together in the 21st century as an 8 billion member tribe, as you put it, or band or species, if we are to expand the circle of us to encompass all of humanity, we must both tame the wolf of hate and in particular feed the wolf of love. And that summarizes so much of what's necessary and clearly is really at the heart of your own work and your own show.
Wouldn't it be fair to say that you have dedicated your life and your life's work to feeding the wolf of love and not the wolf of hate, and to helping others do the same? Isn't that an accurate characterization with due respect and modesty?
Well, again, you're really touching me. I think that's true. When I was a very little boy, I'm old enough now that I'm doing a certain amount of life reflection. And in my earliest memories was a very poignant and kind of wistful sense of unnecessary suffering around me. I grew up in a very basic, kind of lower middle class, intact family, suburban setting outside of Los Angeles. No horrible trauma. And yet I was just aware of a lot of fussing and hassling and criticizing and anger and meanness with the kids, the adults, all the rest of that. So that set me on my way. I've been curious since early childhood, what would help things be better? And definitely, I think that feeding the wolf of love is really a key. While also, as a psychologist and certainly someone who's a student of history, recognizing the power of the wolf of hate. Do not, as they say in Star Wars, do not underestimate so-and-so. Essentially, do not underestimate the power of the wolf of hate. And you can see how vulnerable we are, including in America today or historically around the world, to those who would really rev people up around the sense of grievance and vengeance. And there's been some recent brain research even about what happens in your brain when you're righteously angry and you're forming a group identity around around a grievance and punishment and payback, and they're subhuman and who cares, and we're vulnerable. We have to be careful about that.
We've had to be careful throughout all of time about that, haven't we?
Yeah.
The records show.
Yeah.
How old are you, Rick?
72 and 9/10. 72 and I'll be 73 late October.
Well, first of all, you look terrific.
Well preserved.
You look really healthy. It looks like you're taking care of yourself.
Yeah, I think good genetics. My dad lived just short of 97.
Oh,
my mom, yeah.
Your mom?
Just short of 80. She had lung cancer, probably related to smoking a lot as a young woman. But ordinary genetics. So I am lucky in that regard. And otherwise, thank you.
Yes, you are. I'm 86. I can hardly remember 72. But
wow, you're very well preserved.
Well, I work at it.
Yeah.
I work at it. I put in at least 8 hours a week to maintain my physical body.
Yeah, that's great. Weightlifting.
And exercise.
Yeah.
Both. Yeah. I do the elliptical machine. I do tricycling. I do swimming laps. But I really bought into our colleagues' research indicating that somewhere around age 50, we started to lose muscle mass at the rate of somewhere around 1 to 3% a year.
Yeah.
Now, I can't be positive that research is accurate, but I bought it.
Yeah.
And so what it led me to theorize is that the reason so many people who are fortunate to live into their late 70s, 80s, and even 90s, why they so often look bent over or they're so often walking slowly and shuffling is because they've lost so much muscle mass. I mean, if you lose 1% a year and you're 50, by the time you're 75, you've lost 25% of your muscles, if that's accurate. Yeah. If the researchers are accurate. So I figured if I'm going to get with that research, I've got to put in the time. And it's a lot of time, 8 to 10 hours a week. But, here it is.
You look pretty good. You look really good, as I tell my friends. Still vertical.
Oh, yeah, and I'm still vertical. So, given that suffering that you saw when you were a child,
Yeah.
which I did too,
Yeah. Many do. Many do.
very much so, that influenced my entire life. Given that suffering you saw and what you dedicated your life to do, which is to personally and professionally feed the wolf of love, how's it going, Rick? How's it going?
These are great questions.
Thank you.
As we practice, in other words, as we make deliberate efforts, like you described deliberate efforts for your physical health, which of course has payoffs for mental health and interpersonal health. As we practice, I think it's really important to recognize where you are progressing, where progress is being made. If you want to get better at anything, including resilient well-being or spiritual development in any domain, or you want to get better at making scrambled eggs or playing golf, which you said earlier, or firing guns, shooting targets, let's say, peacefully. It's helpful to observe progress and also observe what's your growing edge that remains. So frankly, yeah, I've been I've experiencing the fruits of practice. I've drawn a lot on I've drawn a lot on the intersection of clinical psychology, contemplative wisdom, and recently modern brain science. So at that intersection, I can say that the practices that I've learned to do and have to some extent thought of myself, have been very fruitful. And I'm happy to offer them freely to people and point to them. And yeah, it's actually true. It has been really helpful for me. And I still have a ways to go. I pay attention to forms of reactivity, exasperation, dehumanization. I try to keep my heart open. I feel like we can put people out of our bedrooms or our business places, out of the halls of power, but we don't have to put them out of our heart. And I try to practice with that as well. So otherwise, you might want to ask people who know me well, my kids, my wife, my friends.
Before the show, I was tipping my hat to you for having the good fortune of having your son work with you. And you mentioned something about what you called keeping your father hat on. And I would like you to talk some about keeping your father hat on, because after we do, and maybe keeping your husband hat on a little bit, I'm going to ask you to put on your professor clinical psychologist hat and teach us some of your foremost tools that you've collected throughout your career. So let's, with the introduction, but you know what's coming, let's talk about father hat, because I have two daughters and I'd like to hear about that myself.
So, right. Well, we do a podcast, our son and I, it's called Being Well, and he's the driving force behind it. I'm delighted to be allowed to be his sidekick in this. And so here we are, we're doing a project together. And if he were not our son, just understandably, when two people or a different kind of a team are doing something, they have a work project, you could assert yourself in certain ways. You can push for certain things in different ways. That's quite appropriate. And yet, when that is done by your father, or let's say your husband, or your brother, or your son, or going further, your fellow congregant in your local Methodist church, or any other kind of relationship you have, it can really be jarring for people. So what I have done, I think, truthfully, with that podcast, is I never take my dad hat off, and if any time I have to choose between what the dad hat would lead me to do compared to a different setting where it's more peer-to-peer, let's say, I just try to keep my dad hat on and swerve in that direction. And for me, it's a way to more broadly almost picking up on the work of Martin Buber, about the I-thou framework, that there are three kinds of relationships: I-thou, I-it, and it-it. And I-thou is what you and I are having now. We're not trying to exploit each other, even though we didn't know each other well before we started, we're real with each other. I'm not trying to use you as a means to my ends. It is when we use others as means to our ends, sometimes in very limited and appropriate ways. Like earlier today, I needed to refill a prescription at a local pharmacy. So I was talking with someone about the minutia of that. Okay, a little bit of it. And then it is bodies in space, walking past each other on the street or side by side in an elevator. And I have a little personal saying that I wrote about once called thou all beings. In other words, turn thou from a noun into a verb, thou all beings. And in the broadest sense, I think that we can do that with others. And a demonstration or example of that is to keep your dad hat on. So you're maintaining that frame, or with your partner. Early on in our marriage, 43 years and going strong still, my wife and I did some business projects together, and I just related to all that as my kind of assertive, forceful, natural tendencies are just let's get it done. And that was quite grating and understandable. And my wife may have said stuff to me where she took her wife hat off, and it landed kind of hard on me. So there was a learning for me there, never take your husband hat off. I've tried to do that ever since.
Can you give us an actual example? Let's say with your son of keep it, please.
Well, force me to listen to this, but it's okay. I don't mind being candid.
Good.
Oh, so if you just imagine you're working together with somebody, and in the podcast, I might think to myself that he's, I would say, sort of a little critical toward me about something I was saying, and as we prepared for an episode, like he would prepare it, I would respond to his preparation, then he would kind of dismiss my response. Now, no offense, if it was just you and me, I'd have a fairly expanded repertoire of possible responses to that. With him, it's a much smaller set of possible responses because I'm keeping my dad hat on, and I'm letting a certain number of pitches go by that I would maybe go harumph if you and I were working together. But because it's our son, beep, beep, frictionless. Beep, let that go by. I mean, I'm prepared, as he would tell you, to say what I think and to be real about it. But I think to some extent also it means just taking into account what the case is for the other person too. Like, I'm always his dad.
Right.
I might think, hey, it's just business. No, it's never just business. With your family relations, certainly. It's never just business. And that's also a way into, staying in touch with the wolf of love. Never lose. It's like keeping your dad hat on is an example of a broader principle of always stay in touch with the wolf of love, especially when you start to notice the wolf of hate beginning to sniff and growl. Mm-hmm. Often because they actually did mistreat you. They actually did do something that was, abrasive, offensive, maybe even mean, or they let you down. The wolf of hate is there for a function. It's there to alert us to things. But especially when you start to feel that sense of contraction and pressure and defensiveness or attack, that's an internal signal to feed the wolf of love. And then interestingly, when you feed the wolf of love, and which helps you return to a sense of gravity and dignity and presence, groundedness, then when you do say something, it's much more effective. This is not a guarantee, but it's often the truth. Think of the moral weight of people like Nelson Mandela or the Dalai Lama, Thich Nhat Hanh, Martin Luther King Jr., Michelle Obama, Greta Thunberg. For me, there's a moral weight in what they communicate because they're still in touch with the longing for a better world, which is an aspect of the wolf of love.
Yes, the longing for a better world. And so over the years of your illustrious career, you have developed tools that you have written about and shared. And I mentioned earlier that I was now going to ask you to put on your hat, your professorial clinical psychologist hat, and share some of your most important tools with our listening and viewing audience.
Thank you for the invitation to do that.
You're welcome. And thank you for accepting it.
I first would preface this by saying that I think it's important to acknowledge when you are drawing on the great wisdom of others and highlighting what others have certainly said. So I won't claim originality for anything I'm going to say. That said, gosh, if I were to name my top 3, here we
Great.
go. Tied for first place.
Okay, I'll tell you my first one too afterwards if you like.
Oh, I love it. I love it. So, okay, so right now, may I ask for you to know what are tied for first place as in the 3? Maybe you're going to end up with, maybe I would end up tied for first place, top 5 or 7, but okay, certainly 3. So you know what they are for you. Okay, good. This is Dr. Rick's list. Now, my list, I would say 1, getting on your own side. It astonished me. And I began to realize after years of doing psychotherapy with people that half the people I was working with, roughly, were not on their own side. They were loyal to others. They were for others, but they did not have that fundamental stance of being for themselves, not against others, but for themselves. Their pilot light was out. So their efforts and mine to bring in fuel to help positive change occur was very short-lived because the pilot light was out. Nothing could really ignite. And so getting on your own side, which for me boils down to realizing first that it's fair and appropriate and reasonable for you to treat yourself with the same respect and decency and kindness that you would want to treat others in general with. Second, besides fair, you can have compassion for your own suffering rather than being indifferent to it. And third, you can tap into a kind of muscular moxie of what it's like to be strong on your own behalf, much like you could be strong on the behalf of other people. So number 1, getting on your own side.
So your number 1 is sort of a flipping of the golden rule, where you're
Very
saying,
good.
Do unto yourself as you would do unto others.
Yeah, that's right. And I think it's especially important to pay attention to this if you belong to any group that structurally has been marginalized or diminished or oppressed, like girls and women, people of color, gays and lesbians, lower class people, economically, because it's so easy to internalize that stance that you're lesser or that you're not entitled or allowed to stand up for yourself and claim for yourself what is fair that you've earned. So that would be 1. You want to hear number 2?
Of course.
All right. So I'm watching your being on radio techniques. I'm studying you, which actually goes to my second one, which is to take in the good along the way. In other words, to help learning land. What I mean by this is that I don't mean merely smell the roses. I mean, when you're experiencing something beneficial, help it sink in. The dirty little secret is that most of the beneficial experiences that people have in clinical settings or probably while listening to a show like yours are momentarily pleasant, but they don't change the brain. Lasting change of the heart, lasting change of the psyche requires underlying lasting change in the physical body, particularly inside the brain. That change process has 2 steps. First, you must experience what you want to grow, what you want to develop inside you, which could be the healing of old pain or trauma. And second, that experience as a momentary, undergirded by a momentary pattern of neural activation, must leave a lasting trace in the nervous system by definition. Otherwise, there's no lasting value. There's no growth. There's no healing. There's no acquisition, no cultivation, no development. That second step is crucial. To slow it down so that you can stay with the experience you're having for half a breath or more. Keep the neurons firing together so they can wire together. Try to feel it in your body. Tune into what's rewarding about it. What I'm describing can happen in the course of a single breath. With repetition, the more the better. And so that as you go through your day, you have the opportunity, half a dozen or more times a day, to influence who you are becoming, bit by bit, breath by breath, synapse by synapse. That's the second key, to be someone who's committed to their own learning through deliberate internalization repeatedly of whatever you're trying to grow inside yourself. I'll give you an example. I grew up as a kind of shy, nerdy kid who was very young going through school. And my parents were kind of old school, Depression era, good people, but they were not great at empathy. And I was I was an outsider in school. I wasn't particularly bullied, but I didn't really exist. I felt extremely awkward and unseen and unloved. So I landed in college at 16 and stumbled on this method I'm used to this day of taking in the good. So I knew that I knew that I did not feel included or valued. So I would look for experiences as a freshman in college of ordinary inclusion. Hey, Hanson, come on over, have some pizza with us. Whoa, they want me to sit with them at lunch. Wow. Or a girl would smile at me in the elevator. Wow, wonderful. Or this Studley quarterback we had in our dormitory intramural football team grunted at me as he passed on by once, Hanson, you're good. I'm going to throw to you more. Whoa. Anyway, opportunities to let it land. So bit by bit, brick by brick, I've gradually filled that ginormous hole in my heart. So that's taking in the good.
Well, that was quite brilliant of you at age 16 to come
I was
to that.
Suffering, so I was motivated.
Well, by the way, I share that. I started college at 16 also.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Oh, little brainiac over there. Good for you. Anyway, and the third one I would really nominate is it's an add-on. It has to do with the fundamental method. I don't quite know. That's very common in psychotherapy and also in the spiritual traditions, in which we link something positive. We link something negative to a positive that's bigger. So, for example, mindful awareness, spacious, open awareness, is holding pain, literally a pain in your knee, physically maybe, or a pain in your heart, concern about the world. It's holding that pain in a broad field of peaceful awareness. Awareness itself is inherently peaceful. It's undisturbed by what passes through it. It's kind of like the screen of a television that can represent anything, but the screen itself is not altered by what it represents. So awareness is like that. And so that's a form of linking. And that's why mindfulness can actually be really helpful for people. A more direct form is if you know that inside you, some important things have been missing, maybe in your childhood or adulthood, you can look for experiences that are the natural nutrients, psychological nutrients that have been missing for you. So I did that in college. I looked for experiences of being included and liked and valued because that was what was missing when I was younger. And then when I felt that, I would be aware of that underlying sense of lack or sadness or wound. And gradually, I would associate those genuine positive experiences today to that old pain or that old lack. And that's a very common method in psychotherapy where you're bringing two things together. And neurologically, if you keep the positive bigger, it will gradually soothe and eventually even replace that negative material. And that's a very, very powerful, powerful method.
Which you developed yourself while you were in school, while you were in college.
Yeah, I stumbled on it. A version of this is that in this life, naturally, the brain has a negativity bias. And so we're designed to learn from our experiences, especially if they're negative in childhood, involving other people. So we acquire, these tendencies, and that creates in us the expectation of pain if we express ourselves fully or feel certain things. So naturally, there's this 3-step process that happens rapidly in your mind. You can observe it often in retrospect, in which something arises in you, like a longing for love, and expressing that. Then second step would be the expectation of pain if you act on that longing or you express yourself in that way, because maybe when you were young, you did express yourself in that way and you got rejected or ignored or dismissed, or you saw it happening around you. Brain is very good at learning from expectations of pain. So that's the second step. And then in the third step, the defense occurs that shuts down that authentic expression of who you are. And that defense then creates the invisible bars of the cage that we then live in. Understandable, because that's what keeps us safe. And yet there's a lot of suffering in that invisible cage. So when you start to understand this about yourself and you begin to help yourself risk the dreaded experience, in a very step-by-step, graduated, careful way, like the rungs of a ladder. Just start very small and then build from there. Well, when, let's say, you risk a little bit with someone who's trustworthy, hey, I could use a hug. Or, hey, it's been a tough day for me. Can you remind me that I have some good intentions once in a while? Or something, you're asking for something. It's scary. You're asking for it. It's a vulnerable request. When it goes well, and it usually does, that's your opportunity for linking. When it goes well, you now have the experience of it going well, and you can then bring that experience in touch with that maybe young place inside you when it did not go well. And then the experience of it going well today can gradually ease that old material and thus push back the bars of your invisible cage, step by step by step. So that is a very powerful path for people.
Why does that old material continue to bother us as the years go by? Why doesn't it drift into the dustbin of history?
That's a great question, isn't it?
Thank you.
It's because we're designed to hold on to that material. The brain has a negativity bias. We're slow learners when things go well. We are one trial learners when they go badly. Just think about it. Let's say you and I were back in the jungle, right? Stone Age, Jurassic Park, right? And you and I are, let's say, are friends, and we need to find carrots and avoid sticks. If we don't get food today, we'll have a chance to get food tomorrow. But if we fail to avoid the predator today, whack, no more food forever. So we're naturally biased toward, you could call it negative emotional learning, and it's designed to stick around. That's why just ignoring it or looking out at the world with rose-colored glasses, positive thinking doesn't touch that negative material. We need to actually get in touch with it. And by getting in touch with it, experience it out, help it release, and then replace it with positive material. It's a little bit like the mind and brain are a garden. You can witness it with mindfulness. It's great. You can pull weeds, like releasing that negative material, and you need to plant flowers, because if you don't replace the weeds with the flowers, like any gardener knows, the weeds will come back.
I wonder to what extent what you're saying impacts media, and that's why they give us so much inflammatory, dramatic, bad news, because it's the kind of stuff that we're attracted to. It's just what you're saying. It's easy to remember that negative experience. So they tell us about accidents, about planes flying and crashing, about cars, about killings, about fires, right?
Yeah.
And I'm reminded, right now I'm at a place called the Health Sanctuary at Wilbur Hot Springs in Northern California. It's a place that I created in 1972.
I've had numerous friends go up there. Wow.
That have gone to Wilbur?
Yeah, I've never been there. Wow, gotta come.
Yeah, I created it in 1972, a health sanctuary, a place to practice many of the things that you're talking about in our profession. And I have a friend from childhood who used to come here very frequently. And I realized one day that that his visit that was most memorable was the time we got stuck in the mud up in the hills and couldn't get the car out, because the inconvenience and the struggle and everything that went with it became one of those experiences that you talk about. And it stands out.
Yeah.
It stands out perhaps more than a lot of positive experiences, because maybe we didn't link them enough. That I don't know. But it wasn't such a trauma that we needed to heal it. But it's an example of what you're talking about on a personal,
Well, you gave another example in your wonderful setup in that if ballpark, if less than 5% of people are born or developed sociopaths who are, as you put it, predators and dominators and predators, I think that was your word.
Yes, dominators and predators.
Why are the 95% of us so manipulated by these really small number of people who often are placing their manipulations on things that are just patently ridiculous? Like, for example, I think back to the run-up toward World War II and Nazi Germany. Jewish people in Germany were a very tiny fraction of the total population.
Yes.
They had already been marginalized. They were highly inoffensive. They were the shopkeepers, violin teachers, and professors and accountants. They were just very benevolent, no big deal. And yet Hitler was extremely effective in stigmatizing that tiny, tiny percentage of people. And that leads me to the view that it's really important to keep our eyes open about our vulnerabilities. Just like back in the Stone Age, we could not store food. If you got any kind of good food, like anything sweet, you should gorge because you couldn't store it. You couldn't transport it. Fill your belly with all the berries and all the sugar you can possibly get a hold of. Well, these days we have that vulnerability toward sugar and carbs. And many people, if they can, they will overeat and become technically obese in terms of their body mass index. And so we have that vulnerability. We have to be careful about it. My grandfather was an alcoholic. I have a vulnerability to alcoholism. I have to be careful about it. Same way, we have a vulnerability to callousness and cruelty. As soon as you start creating distinctions between us and them, the wolf of hate sticks its head up. And as soon as you start to feel desperate yourself, or if you particularly feel mistreated by them, the wolf of hate starts looking for someone to bite. And that, to me, is a very important thing to be humble about, to realize we got to be careful here. And to recognize the ways in which would-be authoritarians, divisive voices are cleverly, just watch the rhetoric, cleverly, exploiting our vulnerability for their own purposes. At the end of the day, what's the purpose? It's for their own wealth and power. And that tells the tale right there.
That vulnerability is what has allowed millions of men to walk into what's called warfare and get killed because somebody has directed them and talked them into a justification for putting on a uniform and shooting other people, isn't it?
It's really haunting. I mean, I'm a Buddhist person, and I don't want to kill and so forth. I recognize that under certain conditions, if you're being attacked, you need people who will defend you. And so I grew up during the Vietnam War, when many soldiers came back and they were mistreated, and that was a terrible thing. So I, on the one hand, want to be really clear about that. On the other hand, we live in a time when, if you just look at the end of the day, there's this classic line, you know it, who benefits? Cui bene in Latin, cui bene, who benefits? Or another version is follow the money.
Yes.
So you look at the way the world works, I mean, going all the way back to our anthropology, inside our bands, we lived on the basis of what scientists call caring and sharing, compassion and justice. Unlike all other of the hundreds of primate species, gorillas, bonobos, chimpanzees, orangutans, et cetera, they organize their social life on alpha dominance, the dominators.
Yes.
It's a dominator social structure,
yes,
grounded in what anthropologists call holding and controlling. Holding food, controlling reproduction. And that's the primate modus operandi. But we humans in our small bands evolved a different strategy that enabled the brain to triple in its volume, which required childhood to get much more extended, which required much more of the development of the social brain, in which parents would have compassion for their children and compassion for each other. And what developed was the so-called village it takes to raise a child. That's the true story of the evolution of the human brain until agriculture and husbandry came to town 10-ish thousand years ago. Certainly by 5,000 years ago, we began having surpluses that enabled larger populations and concentrations of wealth and power in our hunter-gatherer bands. Inside the bands was fairly flat. There were a little bit of hierarchy, little status hierarchy. Maybe the head hunter got the first hunk of meat, from the hunt. Maybe the shaman was honored. Okay, but pretty flat hierarchies because you could not accumulate wealth. And your fates were bound together, and everyone could see what was really going on. There was no rich man's law, no poor man's law. That's healthy human politics. That's our deep nature. But then with cities and empires and all the rest, you started having kings and queens, warlords, dukes, counts, and all the rest. And then you started having societies that operated for the benefit of the 1%,
Yes.
the landed gentry,
Yes.
and most people suffered. And we see much the same in the world today. Do you know that 8 men have as much wealth as 4 billion people?
Yes.
8 men. Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, the guy who owns Oracle, a handful of other people.
Yeah, Larry Ellison. Yeah.
They literally, those 8 guys.
Yeah. As much
as 4 billion people on the planet.
Yes.
And just think about if they just took that wealth and they gave away half of it to that 4 billion, that would double the wealth possessed by the 4 billion people. And in their own case, they would only have $50 billion left. Gee, I feel so sad for you.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That's the world we live in today. And that's why I think what you're doing is so important, to educate people, to realize what our true nature actually is, and to encourage collective action, nonviolent collective action, like we had in our hunter-gatherer bands inside our tribes, in which the many would regulate the few. And that's what we need today in our world, that's run for the benefit of the few at the cost of the many.
You gave some very beautiful examples of how you created what I call self-therapy while you were in college. And you've gone on to share your discoveries and create new ones. And you share them primarily through your books and through the organizations that you founded. Are you also a private practitioner? Do you see patients individually?
I did for a very long time. Right now, I've really dialed that back. I do almost none of that. And I've tried to focus now in my career on the level of collective action. Like you probably, I focused most of my 50-year career on helping individuals through books, courses, in psychotherapy, and so forth. Now I'm really interested in how do we, it's like, Richard, you and I have spent our careers pulling people out of the river of suffering, helping them heal themselves.
Yes.
Beautiful, necessary work, honorable, noble work. And more, I'm interested in what's pushing people into that river altogether upstream. Mm-hmm. What are the upstream causes of the bodies floating downstream that you and I and others in the helping professions are working with? That's what interests me. Like what's the biggest negative factor for mental health? It's poverty.
Yes.
If you want to improve mental health in America, nearly 1 in 5 kids in America lives below the poverty line.
21% of the United States are illiterate. 51% of the United States, again, if our colleagues are accurate, 51% of the United States can read at the 5th grade level or above, but not above. Over 50%. And that is directly connected to the poverty that you're talking about that leads to so much pain.
It's true.
Yeah.
And it's so interesting we're talking about this, because sometimes people think, but get real. And I say, well, let's get real. Let's study countries that are capitalist countries. They're not socialist hellholes like, Finland. I actually lived in Finland for a year when I was young. Real countries, or other basically well-run countries, even in some cases developing countries like Bhutan, that are basically organized around the idea of the common good, not robber baron capitalism, which we are returning to in America.
We've returned to, if I may.
Yeah, oligarchs and all the rest of that, in this kind of crony capitalism, pseudo-capitalism, in which, the friends of those in power get tax breaks and don't have tariffs applied to them.
Yes.
And anyone else who doesn't kiss the ring is attacked with the full force and power of the U.S. federal government, with an acquiescent Supreme Court just fiddling its thumbs. That's the current state of affairs. And point being, it doesn't have to be this way. I mean, it's, you know these things, Richard, but a lot of people don't know the fact that if you look at indicators for a healthy country, of many, many kinds, median family income, rate of improvement in median family income, health indicators, child mortality, mental health, longevity, all the rest, you see and then you imagine all the basically capitalist democracies in the world, a whole bunch of them, New Zealand, Canada, Switzerland, emerging democracies as well. And you see that they all cluster at the high end of these social indicators of healthy country. And the U.S. is all by itself at the other end.
Yes.
It doesn't have to be this way. And I say that myself, frankly. I was a registered libertarian for a number of years. I'm a very autonomous person. I believe in markets. Like Thomas Jefferson, I think the government that governs least governs well. And what I'm describing is factually true.
Yes,
you can appreciate the founding fathers. Like, watch the play Hamilton. They were genius. They were courageous geniuses.
Yes.
Fantastic. You can believe in that vision. You can be an old school, frankly, Republican. You could be Ronald Reagan. You could be Gerald Ford. You could be Dwight Eisenhower. And you can look at America and go, wow, we have lost our way. And this is not good. Yeah. Sorry to rattle on here, but you kind of punch my button here.
That's my job, and I'm delighted that I did push your button, because the things you're saying ring true for many of us, because we're deeply concerned and pained when we have 8 people who have as much money as 4 billion, and we're deeply concerned and pained when 72% of the United States are living paycheck to paycheck with the sword of Damocles over their necks.
Yeah.
And when every Western country has a literacy rate in the high 90s, Russia, Ukraine, China, Germany, France, England, high 90s, the Ukraine in the war, high 90s literacy rate, and we're at 79%. 79%. We are bursting with symptoms.
Yeah.
We have 72%, again, if my colleagues are accurate, 72% of the country, of our deeply suffering country, are overweight or obese. That's not sustainable. 1 in 3 children that are born right now are going to get diabetes. All these things we're talking about, Rick, they're not sustainable.
Yeah, for me, I know we're wrapping up here. I'll just say for myself, I'm startled to add another statistic, which is that 1 in 3 adults in America is not registered to vote.
Wow. That is a startling statistic.
Yeah, that's a fact. And so
that's very interesting. That's an interesting number, Rick, because in our revolution, 1/3 were with the patriots, 1/3 sided with England, and 1/3 completely sat the whole thing out. And it's almost as if you're just presenting us with a number that matches that original number.
Yeah, that's so
1/3 just sat out the revolution.
Yeah, I think of it as a moral. Again, in our hunter-gatherer bands, you couldn't sit it out because you were, the joke about ham and eggs. The chicken is involved, but the pig is committed. So when you're in a hunter-gatherer band, you're committed. You can't sit it out. And people shame you for, then you're a freeloader. No, you have to participate. And basically today, I find that there's not much upside in trying to argue with people who are in the cult.
Yes.
We have a growing authoritarian cult forming. And
yes,
these are my experiences. These are wonderful people, but there's this one slice of the pie in which they believe things that are completely untrue, and they're highly defended around their beliefs.
Fascinating.
They're identified with that identity, and they're not going to budge. It's a waste of time to try to get them to budge. I'm much more interested in reaching out to the people sitting on the sidelines and talking with them.
And getting them involved.
Yeah.
I'm going to segue into another question I want to ask.
Okay, cool. And then I got to wrap up. This is fascinating. You're the bomb. I can see your background in radio. You're really
I do want to ask you this one question.
Yeah.
Freud started out seeing people 5 days a week. You and I, most likely, I'm speaking for you, correct me if I'm mistaken, mostly saw people once a week.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
What do you think of once a week as a treatment modality called psychotherapy to help people with emotional distress?
It's very interesting. So,
This is what happens when you get interviewed by a colleague instead of a regular podcaster.
yeah, so much here. So, I think Freud has gotten quite kind of a bad rap um, in recent times, and actually, it's really important to appreciate what a pathbreaker he was, what a trailblazer. Many of the ideas that are just taken for granted in other non-psychoanalytic forms of therapy were very controversial in his day, and he suffered as a result. Ostracism, certainly anti-Semitism. He fled
Yes.
Austria. I think he had some sisters who actually got sucked up into the Holocaust. It was terrible. Freud. That said, for practical reasons, I think the utilization rate of a single session of psychotherapy with a licensed psychotherapist in America is around 5%. In other words, 95% of the population in America will never see a licensed therapist in their lifetime.
Okay.
And of the 5% that remain, many of them are interested in briefer forms of therapy, once a week for 3 weeks. That's what their insurance company will pay for, and that's what they'll get. So we have these new forms. What do I think about them? This goes to deep questions of therapeutic efficacy.
Yes.
What makes the big difference?
Yes.
Yeah. And that research is actually really fascinating. I am really struck, much as you are, that it's very hard, even in well-controlled studies, to find any meaningful difference between the results of different approaches, psychoanalysis, cognitive behavioral therapy, mindfulness-based approaches, fill-in-the-blank approach. They all seem to have roughly comparable results. The experience of the therapist seems to have little discernible, effect on average. Client variables seem to have very little effect. It's really mysterious because individually, you see the benefits of these things. I'll tell you the thing that I think is the crux in the difference between effective therapy and ineffective therapy. And what's remarkable is how little research there has been on this crux. So people who go through therapy, there are the people who are low responders, medium responders, high responders. The extent of the high responders drags the average result of psychotherapy to the moderate size in terms of effect sizes. I'm saying things that you already know. And numerically, a pretty common metric is 0.6. It's sort of like the treatment group is 0.6 of a standard deviation to the better from the control group.
Mm-hmm.
So, summarizing and simplifying a ton. Okay, keep in mind that that's an average, and it's dragged in the positive direction by the high responders. Who are the high responders? ? Here's another fact. You may know it already. Well-controlled studies on anxiety and depression from 40, 50 years ago and other psychological issues. And then we have 40, 50 years of well-controlled, excellent research on psychotherapy. The average benefit is around that 0.6 number 40, 50 years ago. The average benefit today is around that 0.6 number 40, 50 years later. There's no discernible trend of average improvement in outcomes across psychotherapy over the last 40, 50 years. Now imagine saying that about 40, 50 years of research on cancer or another health condition. If you looked at that and said, wow, we've been banging away on this, new ideas, new personalities, new brain imaging, and all the rest of that, and our results are the same as they were 40 years ago, it'd be scandalous. That's the state of affairs in clinical psychology today. And to me, on the one hand, it's good that we're getting that 0.6-ish average benefit. It's bad that there's no discernible trend of improvement. And I think here's the reason. There's almost no research on what high responders are doing inside their own minds actively while going through psychotherapy. There is research on individual difference variables like a growth mindset or openness to experience in terms of the big 5 factors of personality. Openness is one of the 5. There is research on that, There's research on that sometimes the nature of the psychotherapy, the more active it is, the more experiential, the more engaged it is, the results tend to increase. The stronger the relationship between the client and the therapist, the higher the results tend to be. But none of that has to do with what the client's doing inside their mind while they're in session or between sessions to help the learning land. We're very good at helping people have therapeutic experiences. We're terrible at helping people learn from them. And that's why where I think the opportunity is to study the high responders. I think they are on their own or using what I teach formally. They've been doing it themselves. They've been taking in the good. They've been enriching their experiences. They've been priming their emotional memory-making systems to leave big neural traces. So they're the ones who are getting the high lasting results that are dragging the group average in the positive direction. And I think that's a great opportunity. It's to study the high responders who I bet are using what I call engagement factors with what they're experiencing at the time, which increases positive neuroplastic change and thus lasting learning from what they're experiencing in psychotherapy.
I think you're onto something with studying the people, the high responders who are successful, because I've come up with a tactic to relate to this issue, which is repetition over time, namely doing something that you want to change for 60 seconds, 10 times a day. Well, at the end of the month, you've done it 300 times. At the end of the year, you've done it 3,650 times. That's a lot of repetition, and the new behavior might set in. And when I've talked to colleagues about it, they say, yeah, it'll probably work. But who are you going to get that's going to be willing to do it 10 times a day, every day for 365? You're asking for a lot of discipline. That group that would be so disciplined are, I'm sure, in this, your high responder group, the ones who are successful, because it takes that level of diligence. Well, go ahead.
I would just say that I'll give you a little example. In everyday life, I'll be interacting with my wife, say, and something will happen, and I'll realize, oh, there's a better way. Now, what do I do with that knowing? Do I think to myself, oh, wow, next time I should not interrupt her? Or next time I should start by some kind of emotional joining with her before I work my way toward maybe disagreeing with her about what we ought to do to fix the sink, let's say. Okay. On the other hand, when I register, oh, there's a better way, I could take a few extra seconds, maybe over the course of a breath or two, to stabilize my sense of this better way of being next time. So I'm marinating in the sense of the better way to being. I'm keeping the neurons firing together so they wire together. I could even get a sense of my body. Like how would I enact that in my body, this better way of being? I might sit up a little straighter. I might not lean aggressively toward her. I might not wag my finger. I might slow down and calm down first. Okay. And I could also notice what feels good about this better way to be. Now, all the things I've described with a little practice, you'll do in a breath or two. That's 10 seconds.
That's right.
And it's very enjoyable too, because it feels good. It's like you're letting the good way to be establish itself in you. You are establishing yourself in it. It's sinking in. And so then the next time the occasion arises about the plumber in the sink, I've trained my brain a little bit already to incline toward that better way of being. I've helped myself to learn from that previous experience that recognized a better way to be. And in other words, we have a power inside ourselves to help ourselves gain and grow and heal and learn from the experiences we're having at the time through how we engage them at the time. We could just let them wash on through us while the negative experiences get caught routinely, or we could slow it down for a breath or two or three to help learning land, to help the new way of being to sink in. That's what I'm talking about here in terms of I think that's the X factor in successful therapy. And therapists themselves, because probably a lot of them are listening to you with good reason, therapists themselves can aid this process by deliberately slowing it down for their clients and deliberately drawing their clients into any one of a number of evidence-based neuroplastic factors of change. like, for example, recognizing why something is personally relevant, or feeling it in their body, or just sort of staying with the experience rather than chasing the next shiny object. So therapists can help people in this way. We can help our children in this way. We can help the people who work for us in this way. In healthcare environments, basically 50% of the disease burden in America is mental health issues or lack of compliance with treatment. So we can encourage people in those settings. Anyway, to me, that's a great opportunity. And maybe it goes to my libertarian background because it emphasizes the autonomy and the agency of the individual inside the innermost temple of their being.
The way that I stop myself from interrupting you while you're speaking is doing exactly what you're suggesting, which is using my breath. And I told you earlier that I would share one of my tools when I asked you about your tools. And my number one tool is breathing. That is far and away my number one. And number two is there, but it's not even close, because I have literally saved my life with breathing, literally on an occasion, a big time saved my life. And I stopped myself from being an interrupter with breathing. And I do a lot of other things with breathing. And that's the tool that I favor, number one. And so I'm going to take a very brief commercial break now, and I'm going to give you a little tiny assignment. While I'm on my commercial break, which I'll come back for, and then we're going to end the show. While I'm on the break, I'd like you to think about if we ended right now, instead of my coming back from the commercial, and you walked into your other room and you had a thought, I wish I would have just added whatever it is, XY. When we come back, I'm going to ask you, was there anything you discovered that you might have wished you would have added?
Sure.
Thank you. I hope that's fun. The commercial. Mind, Body, Health, and Politics. We've been broadcasting for 20 years. We give platforms to people who we stand behind, who we want you to hear what they have been doing and what they've been studying and what they want to share, because they're people that want to improve the human condition. And so I thank you for listening. We come up with a new program every week. You can go to mindbodyhealthpolitics.org and get on the mailing list, and then we'll send you a newsletter letting you know who our next guest will be. I also have a new book out called Master Your Mind. You can check it out on Amazon. And one of the tools I talk about in the book is the one I just mentioned to Dr. Rick Hanson, was his breathing. So now back to Rick. Anything that came into mind that you might want to add?
Well, two things, and they're kind of related. So first, about politics and coming together and the urgency of that. I think it's really important to realize that even as we're aware of the headlines and the divisiveness and the gridlock and the bad faith, I think we see in politics, while that's happening, it's important to realize that so many good people are coming together to do good things. Don't give up. And the central government, the federal government, and often central governments in other countries is not the solution, it's the problem. Meanwhile, there are plenty of opportunities in the in-between space at the community level, at the city council level, at the school board level, at the neighborhood group level, for people just to come together for good. And it's beautiful to appreciate that so many people are doing that. Frankly, historically, the forces of wealth and power have tried to dishearten people and push them into divisiveness and despair. And we need to realize there are many efforts to do that these days. But in fact, if we tune that noise out, there are many opportunities to come together to make something better. Just, take a breath, feel the grief, feel the sorrow, stop whining, get off your butt, reach out to other people. What can we do together to make things better? As my friends would tell me, I'm a longtime rock climber. Stop whining, Hanson. Start climbing. I think we need to climb. That's one. And two, related to that, playfulness. We haven't really talked too much about that. You and I have been quite playful with each other in our natures, I think. There's research that shows that playfulness releases neurotrophic factors in your brain that accelerate learning. Oh. Whoa, that's pretty great. So being playful, keeping in mind a playful spirit in your life in general, and to the extent you kind of organize with other people at the level of two parents getting a stop sign put in next to their kid's school, on up. When you get together with other people, keep some good humor about you, a twinkle in your eyes, a playfulness, a creativity that comes from playfulness. So those are my 2 suggestions on the way out the door here.
I love ending the program on playfulness. If you're ever in, where are you located right now?
In San Rafael, California. I'm
You're
only
in-
about, I don't know, 50 miles south of you, maybe.
San Rafael.
Maybe more.
Well, I'm about 2 hours away at Wilbur Hot Springs, where I live part-time. And I also live in Mendocino County in a little fishing village called Fort Bragg. If you'd ever like to visit with your lovely wife here at Wilbur or there, you'd be most welcome in either place. And so thank you again for being with us today. It's Dr. Rick Hanson. Go to Google, go to Amazon. You can find his books. You can find a wealth of information about the important, very important material that he has brought to us over his lifetime. Until next time, folks, this is Dr. Richard Lewis Miller reminding you that good health is worth fighting for, and it's essential for life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.